Welcome to the Cashflow Ninja, the podcast sharing how to create and grow income streams and manage, multiply, and protect your wealth in the new economy. Are you tired of trading your time for money? Do you desire freedom today instead of retirement in 10, 20, or 30 years? I'm MC Laubscher, and this is the Cashflow Ninja. Hello, Cashflow Ninjas. MC Laubscher here, and welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Ninja. I have a great show for you today. In today's show, we're going to look at how you can earn six figures in 6 months on Airbnb using other people's properties. My guest in this episode is Brian Page. Brian made his first million before the age of 30 in the wild world of real estate. During the historic crash of 2007, he lost it all. Starting over with no credit or savings to speak of, he went on to start an Airbnb business, making over six figures in his first 6 months using properties he didn't own. After automating and outsourcing nearly every aspect of his business, Brian has enjoyed traveling the world and managing his Airbnb empire from his laptop, seeing 16 countries so far just this year. He believes wealth is not merely having money, but also the time and freedom to enjoy it. Brian Page is currently the only person who shows entrepreneurs how to build a multi-listing 6 to 7 figure Airbnb business without having to own a single property, as well as how to outsource and automate that business across the 192 countries that Airbnb operates in. Brian is hosting a webinar for Cashflow Ninja listeners and viewers in which he shares how to earn six figures in 6 months on Airbnb using other people's properties. You can access that webinar at cashflowninja.com/BNB. That's cashflowninja.com/BNB. And just want to remind you that if you have not checked out my new podcast, Cashflow Investing Secrets, you are totally missing out. I would highly recommend it. It's a shorter show, 10 minutes or less, where I share one idea and concept at a time that I've learned from interviewing over 500 Cashflow Ninjas. You can listen to the show on your favorite podcast, video, and live streaming platform. And just a reminder, we have an investment group and community for accredited investors. If you're interested to join the group, please visit cashflowninjainvestorsnetwork.com. And to stay up to date for everything Cashflow Ninja, join our community on Facebook by simply going to Facebook and typing in Cashflow Ninja Community. Savvy investors know that in order for the miracle of compounding interest to work, its magic, you have to be constantly invested in all stages of the economic cycle. So the question then becomes, how do you find solid investments when the stock market is close to all-time highs and everything else just seems so inflated? That's where our friends at ASIM Capital come in. Since 2011, ASIM has helped more than 300 accredited investors allocate more than $25 million to mobile home parks, self-storage, and workforce housing due to their ability to perform well during economic recessions. If you're interested in learning more, head on over to asimcapital.com. That's ASYM capital.com to get instant access to their investment offerings. MC Laubscher, the creator of the Cashflow Ninja and Cashflow Coach at Producers Wealth, where we help our clients integrate infinite banking with their business and investments. To learn how you can create your own banking system to turbocharge your investments and business in 30 days or less, go to yourownbankingsystem.com. That's yourownbankingsystem.com. Brian, welcome to the show.
Great. I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, super excited to connect. And I've just been fascinated with what you're doing and what you're involved with. So I'm very excited to jump into that part of it. But before we do, can you please share a little bit about your background and journey with my listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a real estate investor ever since I graduated college. I knew I did not want to work for someone else. I was miserable every job I had. I either got fired from or I quit. And so I was looking to build wealth and find cash flow. And I started with real estate. I thought that was the best vehicle, and did really well with real estate as a young guy in my 20s, became a multimillionaire, and then lost everything during the big crash of 08, 07, 08, 09. And that kind of necessitated me coming up with a creative solution. And that's how I found home sharing, and I found Airbnb, and that became a whole other thing. And I was able to rebuild my life with Airbnb. And now I teach people all over the world how to do exactly what I do.
Yeah, an absolute game changer. So you went through, obviously, the last storm that we had, 2008. Yes. What was that time like? Because you built up a portfolio. What was it? Single family, multifamily? What were you involved with?
Yeah, I didn't do commercial, but I did single family. I did duplexes, quadruplexes. I also got into construction and spec homes, large multi-million-dollar homes, and I did lease options. I did a little bit of everything. I was mostly flipping and renovating, and so I had a nice portfolio. But I was getting into the speculation side, and that's not a place you want to be. You don't want to be a developer or a speculator right before a bubble crashes. That's not a good place to be, and that's what happened with me.
Yeah. So as we're looking at market cycles right now, there's different opinions and all that kind of stuff out there. I think one thing that most folks would agree on is saying, hey, there are a lot of inflated asset prices out there currently in the marketplace. What are some of the lessons that you would take into, a potential next downturn, or in your investing in your business? How are you positioning yourself?
Well, that was a good question. Somebody asked me that the other day. For me, the biggest mistake I ever made in my life financially was not understanding what asset allocation means, and not understanding that I was fully invested in one asset class, which was real estate. And at the time I thought, well, I'm safe. I got real estate, I got cash flow, I got renters. There's nothing can go wrong. Had I just taken a little bit of money and put it into another asset class like precious metals, or maybe the stock market or something else. Of course, the stock market also took a nosedive then. But there's all kinds of different things you can invest into. The key is, I believe, is having your eggs in multiple baskets, not just one basket, in case something goes wrong, in case an asset class collapses. And I think right now, anybody who's fully invested in the stock market, for example, you might have a rude awakening in the next couple of years or even sooner. So you need to make sure once you start building wealth to put it in various places. So when one asset class collapses, another asset tends to go up. And so that's what asset allocation is all about.
Yeah. So let's jump into this topic for today. So Airbnb, you've developed a system. I was just blown away the first time I saw this, and this is probably one of the greatest business opportunities I've come across in the last couple of years, and especially where we're at right now. Can you share when you came across Airbnb, how you started, and what the system involves that you've created?
Yeah, sure. So what I essentially do is I found a way to hack properties that I don't own, ethically and legally. So what I do is I create cash flow from properties by controlling them rather than owning them. And this came out of necessity because after the big crash, I didn't want anything to do with real estate. I certainly didn't want to sign my name to any more debt. I had no interest in going back into real estate. I was burned. My finances were a wreck. My credit was a wreck. But I was renting out a room in my apartment, and I knew I was making good money doing that. I just needed to find a way to scale it. And so a chance encounter with a guy on a plane, a very wealthy guy, he said to me, why don't you just control properties rather than owning them? And I said, how do I do that? He said, well, you can control them with leases, and you can control them by partnering with the owners. And so I started doing that. I went home, found a little one-bedroom apartment. I approached the owner, and I said, hey, I want to lease it from you, but I'm not going to live in it. Is that okay? I want to put it on Airbnb. She didn't even know what the Airbnb was, but she said, okay. And I signed the lease, and the amount of rent that I was paying on that unit, I actually made double and triple that rent every month after that. And I put in my pocket somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 a month cash flow on one little one-bedroom apartment. So that right there was like a game changer because I was used to making 1/10 that amount on a property that I owned. And so that allowed me to go out and get more properties, and I kept stacking them. And then I made a little over $300,000 my first year. And I still do Airbnb. I now buy properties again. This time with cash. I still do leases, and I do partnerships with people where I'm partnering with the owner and we do a revenue share. So basically it allows anybody to become a real estate investor without actually owning real estate.
It's quite incredible. And this is something, we have listeners all over the world. This is something that could be done all over the world and duplicated the system. Yeah. And Airbnb, I mean, it's just growing so fast in just so many different countries. Can you speak to some of the markets? Because I think this might be some questions that folks have. New York City, for example, is not very Airbnb friendly, right? No. So there's certain markets that are not. Can you just speak to some of the markets and how all of them are different?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me talk about international for anybody who's international. Airbnb has 3 of every 4 listings outside the U.S. right now, outside the U.S. So it's a U.S. company, and it's on fire outside the U.S. And I travel a lot. I go to a lot of countries. And when I go to these other countries, I meet people that are doing Airbnb. So when I was in Egypt touring the pyramids, the pyramid guide with the camel, he actually was doing Airbnb as a side hustle. When I went to Costa Rica and I'm whitewater rafting, the whitewater rafting guide was doing Airbnb. So everybody's doing Airbnb all over the world, and the opportunity is huge overseas. It really is. So that's an opportunity. In the U.S., there's also huge opportunity. And what's interesting is the opportunity is not just in the big cities. It's in predominantly, it's very strong in the secondary and third market. So like little towns, medium-sized towns. And I know this only because I have thousands of students now. And a lot of them are doing unbelievable numbers in very small towns, like under 10,000 people. And it might seem strange, like why would anybody travel to a little town like that? But the simple fact of the matter is people travel all the time for all different places. That's why the hotel industry exists, right? There's hotels everywhere. Right. Hotels don't just exist in tourist areas or in big cities. So people need a place to go when they travel, and now they're choosing Airbnb, a lot of people, over hotels.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And some towns might have niche things too. I know that you're just in my area where a lot of people wouldn't think that Airbnb would be prevalent here. It is because we have Washington Crossing next door. Yeah. So a lot of people want, they want to come and see Washington Crossing, where George Washington crossed the Delaware River and march on Trenton and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, there might be, or it might be in close proximity to something else that they want to go to. Can you talk about the overall strategic approach that folks should have too? Because this is a business, number one. And number two, you have to figure out who you serve, whether it's, I think a great example is like Nordstrom, Target, and Walmart. And then also you need to be able to identify where you fit into the whole picture with regards to hotel and the other options that folks might have.
Sure. Well, I forgot to answer your last question in full. So let me go back and touch that, which is the legality. There are certain cities where you do not want to do this, like New York City, some of the larger metro areas like Atlanta proper, San Francisco, places where there's, housing shortages and there's a very, very powerful hotel industry. Okay. But that doesn't mean you can't do Airbnb in those areas. I got students in all of those areas that are doing well. And what they do is they simply go around the areas that's not allowed. And we did a research on the 2,000 biggest cities in the U.S., 2,000 cities above 30,000 people. And what we found is that 9 out of 10 of them allow home sharing and 1 out of 10 do not. So if you happen to live in a 1 out of 10, like my students that are in New York, they just simply go over to New Jersey and they get listings there. So they go within a 45-minute radius of where they live. And it's no different than any kind of real estate. If you're going to try to open a coffee shop, you can't do that in a residential house. You got to do it where coffee shops are allowed. And you can't live inside of a hair salon, for example, because it's not residential. So same thing with Airbnb. You got to go where it's allowed. But thankfully, most places it is allowed. So that's the first thing. The second thing was you're asking about essentially how do you structure it or how do you grow it? What was your question?
Yeah, just if you could just speak to the strategic approach that you have to have where all this figures in, because there is, you have to look at where your business fits in because you're starting a business, right? Yes. And it's important to approach it as a business from day one.
Yes, it's very important to approach it as a business, and it's very important to be the business owner and not the business operator. So when you first start out with 1 or 2 listings, you can do it all yourself. In fact, I recommend you do it yourself so you can learn what's involved. It doesn't take very much time to manage a couple Airbnb units. But once you start scaling it and get a bunch of these, you need to have the mentality that you are going to own the hotel, not be the front desk manager. So there's people that own hotels, so they make a lot of money owning the hotel, but that doesn't mean they're the person that you see when you check in. There's somebody else who's the manager. So that's the same thing you do with Airbnb. You can actually hire people, individuals like virtual assistants, what we call VAs, or you can hire services online that will charge you a few percentage points of what you make on Airbnb, and they manage the guests. They manage all the messages. They manage the cleaners and all the people that are going to be going in and out of the property. Yeah. So you can do all this, outsource it, and now you can start scaling without having to work a full-time job, because that's the last thing I want to do. I want to find out how to make passive income or semi-passive income. So that's what I teach. I teach people how to scale and how to outsource. Now, if you want to get 1 listing on Airbnb, you don't need to listen to me. It's not that hard to do. But if you want to scale the business to 6 figures or even 7 figures, I have a couple students that are about to cross $1 million a year on Airbnb. And there's many people that have done this. Forbes magazine said there's 75 people, and that was 3 years ago. So there's hundreds of people now, as far as I know, that are doing over 7 figures a year on Airbnb. So, so the potential is huge, but you got to learn how to scale it. And that's what I teach, is how to build a machine that manages all of these things. So you're not running around to properties, you're not cleaning properties, you're not making beds, you're not answering guest questions at 2 a.m. You're not doing all that stuff. And that's really what I specialize in.
Yeah, and part of it too is within some of the content that you put out, is to find yourself in that blue ocean within your market and not competing against basically hotels and all the other options that folks have. And it's important too, I think like the example that I find very, very helpful is Nordstrom, Target and Walmart.
Yes.
You have to figure out, all of those stores sell shirts, and they make a lot of money, every single store of them selling shirts, but they know where they fit.
Well, let's talk about that. That's a great point. That's a great point. Let's talk about that. So when I got started with Airbnb, I was getting properties that were, I guess you could say, higher end. They were expensive. Yeah. Now I've got into even higher end, like luxury, multi-million-dollar properties, and I've gone to the very, very low end, like low income areas, where properties are really dirt cheap that I bought, renovated, and turned into Airbnbs. And what's shocking is people are like, why would you buy in those low income areas? It's not going to do well, but they're absolutely crushing it. I mean, we're talking about paying off a property in 2 or 3 years. That's how much cash flow these things are making. So there's opportunity at the low end, there's opportunity in the middle, there's opportunity in the high end, and even in the higher luxury market. So you can choose any of those places to get started. I don't recommend starting in the luxury high end, because you're talking about a significant amount of money every month that you're committing to bring in for that owner or pay in a lease. But the simple fact of the matter is, everybody needs to travel. So an example of one of my properties that I only charge $100, maybe $200 a night on the weekends for, is a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. It's 900 square feet, so it's very tiny. But somebody says, who's going to stay in that area? It's not even a good area. It's a junky neighborhood. I said, well, somebody coming to town that has a family and needs 3 bedrooms, they can't stay in a hotel for $100 on a Tuesday night. They can't. The hotels cost more than that here. Yeah. So, and I'm only charging $97, and they get this whole house with a yard and everything. So hotels can't compete with me on that, and that's why my calendar stays full. Now, on the other end, you could have a $2,000 studio, for example, in a city, and people want to stay there because they'd rather stay in a studio than a hotel. They want to stay in a nice, beautiful building that's maybe in a residential area and not in a box that looks like every other box in the building. So there's different levels that you can start at and you can market to. It doesn't have to be high end; it can be low end, and the opportunity is pretty much everywhere. So, because there's different travelers that have different budgets.
Absolutely. And that ties into my next question. You're controlling the lease. So when you in the system, you don't own all the properties. It's the lease that you can control. And this is all done above board, negotiated with the landlord. Yes,
we do not sneak around. I tell people, do not sneak around. You want to get it in writing up front. You tell them exactly what you're doing. Yep. And that's it. So you have them sign an agreement, an addendum essentially, that just says, this is what I'm going to do. And they're good to go. And some owners are going to say, no, I don't want to do that. Some owners will say yes. It doesn't really matter. There's so many rental properties out there. So you just get a few people to say yes, and you're off to the races.
And there's different ways to negotiate with these owners, because that would be the other question. The first question would be, what would make this attractive for them, number one, and number two, what are some of the options? Because of course this is still, as everything in life, you still have to sell this to them to show them the benefit of partnering with you.
Yeah, some people say, why would an owner do this? It doesn't make any sense. Well, the reason they want to do this is because I show them how I'm the best tenant that they could possibly rent their property to. And I tell them this because I'm going to do things that no tenant would ever do for them. So for example, if you have a property, I would say, sir, I love this property. I'd like to lease it. And let me tell you why you want to lease to me. I'm going to take care of the minor maintenance on the property. So if something breaks under $100, I'm just going to fix it. I'm not going to call you about a clogged toilet. I'm not going to call you about something minor. Now, why would I be willing to do that? Because this is my business. I'm going to make money with your property, and I'm willing to do that. So you're not going to worry about minor maintenance. Secondly, I'm going to have a cleaning company clean your property 2 or 3 or 4 times every week till it's spotless. Because if it's not clean to that level, I can't invite the next guests in. So I can promise you your property will be clean, be kept in better condition than it's ever been kept before. Beyond that, I'm going to also make sure that guests are not bringing pets, because I don't allow pets in the property. They're not going to smoke in the property. They're not going to do modifications on the property without permission. In other words, they're not going to paint one of the rooms a weird color, or put a satellite dish on the roof, or leave their car in the driveway on blocks, or all these kind of things that happen with tenants. Tenants cause problems, guests do not. So beyond that, I know who the guests are. I have their credit card on file because Airbnb has it on file. I've already charged them $500 in a deposit if something goes wrong. So I go on and on and on, explain all this to them. And basically I say, look, your property is going to be maintained by a professional. I'm not somebody that's going to live there and junk it up over the next year. So you come back and now you have to renovate the house again to get it ready for the next tenant. And if you're willing to do that, let's sign the lease. And he or she may say no. And I can also come back with, hey, well, what if I give you a little bit more money? You're asking $1,000 a month. What if I gave you $1,100 a month? Would that be agreeable to you? So it's just a matter of negotiating with them and showing them how you're the best option. And every owner I've ever worked with says the same thing. They're like, I cannot believe how amazing you've kept my property, what kind of condition you've kept my property in. Because it literally looks exactly like the photos every single day, because it's been staged, it's been furnished, and now it's in perfect shape.
That was going to be the next question that I have. So obviously some of these have to be furnished. And yes. What are some of the things that you can share just around that of the most effective and most efficient way to do that?
Okay, so you absolutely have to furnish the properties. You can start looking for furnished rentals. So when I first started out, I didn't think about that. I just started furnishing them myself. My second listing was furnished, fully furnished. So I didn't have to do anything. I just put a couple soaps in there and some towels and listed it and was ready to go. So if you can find furnished properties, great. Go ahead and get them. Even if they cost a little bit more money, it's worth it. If you can't find it, then you want to furnish it, and you want to furnish it cheaply, but with quality stuff. You do not need to buy furniture new. Furniture is one of the fastest depreciating liabilities you can buy. So you can get furniture for next to nothing. And I teach people how to furnish a place very cheaply, but make it look great. And then above and beyond that, if you're going to partner with the owner, so if I'm going to partner with you, I might say to you, hey, look, why don't I just split all the revenue that we make on Airbnb together? Now I'm not signing a lease, right? So I'm not going to sign any kind of long-term lease, and I'm going to ask you to furnish it for me. So all I ask is that you help me with the cost of furnishing it. I'll get all the furnishings together, I'll decorate it for you, and then we'll list it and we'll split the revenue on it. And you'd be surprised how many owners will say yes to that. And so you can have the owner pay for the furnishings. There's all kinds of different options, but even if you got to pay for it out of pocket, so what? So you pay a couple grand. If I have a one-bedroom apartment, I pay $2,000 to put used furniture in there. I can make $2,000 in a month or two and pay it back in my pocket. So that's what I teach people how to do.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously the furnished apartment, that reduces the risk and the capital outlay up front. So furnished apartments is a great place, a great place to start. And then this is part of the system. Scaling this with different properties within your system, like you said, eventually you're going to unplug yourself. At what level is that? Is that something like in one or two properties that you're now taking a step back and systematizing it? At what stage does that happen?
Well, for me, I quit my job around listing 5, and I would say about 4 to 5 listings, you really need to have a system in place. And it's not that you're removing yourself entirely. I kind of liken it to like you're being like a traffic cop. So you're standing there, you're watching everything happening, you're managing the people or the systems that are out there that are managing it for you, because you don't have to have any employees. Everybody's virtual. And you're just managing them, and you step in when you need to step in. So you're still watching your business, but a few hours a week to manage all your listings. So I tell people that after you have a few listings, you want to start automating everything. And that way you want to have that experience so you can teach people how you want to manage your listings. And nowadays there's all kinds of people that do this. If you ever use websites like Upwork or some of these outsourcing sites, there are people on there, that's all they do is manage Airbnbs. And you can pay somebody in the Philippines $5 an hour, or you can pay somebody here in the States $10 an hour, and they can manage your listings. And it's well worth it, because your listings, at that point, I've got many students that have 5 listings that are doing over $100,000, like in their pocket, $100,000. So it's easy to pay somebody a few $100 a week to manage that stuff.
You're listening to the Cashflow Ninja, the show helping people all over the world create monthly cash flow and achieve freedom today, not in 10, 20, 30, and or 40 years. This is the show where cash is not king, but cash flow is king. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors. Kings, queens, and royal families, along with the nobility and ultra-rich, have warehoused and stored their wealth for centuries in gold and silver, art, land, and real estate. These assets have stood the test of time through centuries and have been a great place to preserve and protect their wealth. Like gold, silver, land, and real estate, art has been around for centuries and will be around for many, many more centuries. That's why the ultra-rich will continue to invest in art and preserve their wealth in art. While the S&P declined 5.1% in 2018, the art market returned 10.6% and was called the best investment of 2018 by the Wall Street Journal. Masterworks is the first company to allow investors to buy shares of great blue chip art masterpieces by artists like Picasso, Monet, and Warhol. You can get set up on their platform at cashflowninja.com/art.
My friend Dave Zook from The Real Asset Investor says you can be conventional or you can be wealthy. Pick one. The Real Asset Investor team creates value for investors looking for higher yield returns from ATM machines and self-storage investments. Their syndications offer attractive investment opportunities that produce strong cash flow, equity growth, huge tax incentives. They are truly passive and managed by a world-class team. To learn more about the exciting investment opportunities the Real Asset Investor offers, such as their ATM and self-storage syndications, please visit cashflowninja.com/real asset investor. You're listening to the Cashflow Ninja, the show helping people all over the world create monthly cash flow and achieve freedom today, not in 10, 20, 30, and or 40 years. This is the show where cash is not king, but cash flow is king. Now let's return to our interview. Absolutely. What are some of the risks that folks have to look at? Because obviously there might be some things that we're not even aware of.
Yeah.
What's been your experience? What are some of the risks that have to be managed?
That's a good question. Most people don't ask that question. So the number one risk that comes up in people's mind is signing a lease. I don't think signing a lease is risky because I get to control the property and I get all the profit and I don't have to share it with the owner. So to me, it's not risky, but there's an easy way to overcome that. You just partner with the owner. And now you have that confidence. You know the property's making X amount of dollars per month. Now you can go out and get another property just like it in your town. Yeah. So that's some people see that as a risk. I don't see it as risky at all. Beyond that, I would say the risk is more to the owner. And now, before I move on, I don't want anybody to believe I don't like owning. I love owning property. I think you should own property. Nothing wrong with that. I don't think you should leverage your properties heavily, but I do think owning property is fine. But if you're going to be working with somebody else who owns the property, the risk is kind of on them because they have liability and they could have damage to their property. But thankfully, there's one way to overcome both of those. There is what they call short-term rental insurance or vacation rental insurance. There's a whole industry that's sprung up to support this. Yeah. It does not cost that much money. You can get an entire policy that will cover the property. If it were to burn to the ground or anything were to happen to that property, it's covered. And then there's liability coverage. So you get $1 million in coverage, for example, of liability if somebody were to sue you or sue the owner or get hurt or any of that kind of stuff. Now that's optional. You don't have to do that because Airbnb also has a $1 million policy, $1 million host protection insurance, they call it, or host protection coverage, I think they call it. Now, it's not technically insurance because it's Airbnb's coverage, but they do cover you for damages. If they approve it, they will pay for damages that guests cause. And by the way, it's extremely rare. The studies have shown that the number of people that damage Airbnbs is actually lower than much lower than tenants and much lower than people who stay in hotels. So it's very, very, very rare that ever happens, but you're covered for those kind of things. So to me, the risk can all be mitigated. And to me, that a business that you can start for a few $1,000 that could make you $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month per property. That's I don't know anything else that you can do that quite as fast as this.
Yeah, you make a great point with the insurance between short-term rental insurance and that coverage, the insurance from the Airbnb. And if you really, if the owner then still isn't comfortable with that, you can always negotiate and say, Mr. Owner, how about I pay for an umbrella policy, which is owned by you around this. So now there's several millions of dollars that can be done very cost effectively if done right is in place to just make them even more comfortable.
And I make them the name on the insurance policy. So now I use it as a selling tool. I say to them, Have you ever had a tenant that will cover the minor maintenance on the property, clean it professionally, and insure your property and pay for it out of their own pocket? Have you ever had anybody that would do that? No, of course not. So I'm going to be the best tenant you've ever had, and the insurance is only for you. It's not for me. So if anything ever happens, you'll get paid out. And owners are just shocked by that. They're like, wow, that's actually pretty cool. So I've thought of all the things in advance. I've thought of all the objections they could have. And if they say no at that point, it's just because they just don't want to try something new.
Right. And of course, I always joke, being from South Africa, one of my favorite sayings is the jungle always wins, which means nature always wins. Nature is nature, and it's better to go with nature than against nature, right? If a big storm is coming, you're not like, yeah, I'm taking this on. No, you're running away from the storm. And sometimes when because here's one of the thoughts that folks might have listening to this. They might say, well, why don't the owners just do it themselves? Again, nature inherently.
Let me answer that, because that's a good question.
Go ahead.
Everybody says that. So I've met with hundreds of owners face to face, pitching them on this idea.
Yeah.
Never once had an owner say, that is a great idea. I'm going to go do that myself right now and take it off the market. They don't do that. Yeah. Now, if they did, I wouldn't care. That's fine. That's totally fine, because there's tons of properties that are out there. Most owners, you got to put yourself in their shoes. And some people might be listening are owners of multiple properties. Yeah. They're really concerned with two things. They don't want vacancies, and they want somebody who's going to pay the rent on time and not damage the property. That's what they're looking for. So when they have a vacancy come up, they're just looking to fill the vacancy. They're not looking to start another business, because most people thinking, oh, that's too much work, and why would I want to start another business? And it is a lot of work if you don't have a system like what I teach. So they have no interest in starting another business. They probably do other things. They might be a doctor or a teacher or have a career outside of being a real estate investor. And so they just don't have the time or the interest to even do that. The ones who are doing it, some owners are smart, and they know the potential here. They're already doing it fully, and they're not going to give up their properties for anything but Airbnb or short-term rentals. So to me, it just doesn't happen. If it does happen, who cares? Because it's an idea that's getting out there. But the fact of the matter is, the vast majority of owners have never considered it and will be willing to rent to you if you present it in the right way. And so you make it very clear that you're going to make money with their property, but you're also giving them what they want. And all they want is a great tenant. That's what they're looking for.
Right. And it's back to that nature comment. It's like you present it to them saying, hey, you could do this all yourself, or you could partner with me and I'll take care of all of that, and you just get the income from that.
Yeah. I mean, if they were to say to me, I'm going to do it myself, I'd say, why? Let me do it. Don't do any work. We'll split the revenue and you don't have to do anything.
Yep. Yeah. Which is great. So there's a webinar available for listeners that's interested in this, cashflowninja.com/BNB. That's cashflowninja.com/BNB. I would highly recommend you check it out. What are some of the things, Brian, that you're still studying and learning? Because one habit I've observed from wealthy and successful folks is they're always studying new things and learning in the industry. And obviously, this whole sharing economy is exploding, and there's a lot of changes going on. What are some of the things you're learning and studying?
Well, first of all, I want to go back and address what you just said. So I want to invite everybody to this free training. And what I'm going to do in that free training is I'm going to go into very, very specific details. So I'm going to show you the properties. I'm going to show you what I'm making on them. I'm going to go through the numbers. I'm going to show you other people who've done exactly what I teach, because it's one thing for me to say I've done it. It's another thing to show you that I get people results. I'm going to go through that. It's about a 1 hour training. I'll show you everything that I'm doing and kind of explain the formula and all the steps of how this works from start to finish, and show you basically how to get a property in the next 30 days. It's very possible to get your first property in the next 30 days. So that training's for free. What was that link again?
cashflowninja.com/BNB.
/BNB. Okay. And then, so come join us for that. And then the other thing that I wanted to answer is what you said, is what am I still doing as somebody who is constantly learning and expanding? To me, the most important thing is to find mentors. So I have mentors. I spend a lot of my personal money on coaching, on consulting, on direct mentors. I've worked with some of the biggest names on the planet, and been able to learn from them. And so I find that if I can pay the best in the world to get their knowledge, it's a shortcut. People say there's no shortcut to success, but I disagree. The shortcut to success is either you can go through the experience yourself, or you can hire somebody who's experienced to teach you the shortcuts. And you can learn from someone else's experience, in other words. So the biggest shortcut is to work with the best in the world and download into your brain what they know as quickly as possible to get the result that you want. So I look for people that are really good at getting results for themselves and for other people, and then I try to work with them directly. And that's what I've done with everything in my business. And I would recommend that people do that as well. Most people don't look at it that way. They think it's a cost. But to me, I always ask myself, if I could invest into a relationship with somebody or get 1 hour of somebody's time, and I've paid upwards of $10,000 for an hour of somebody's time, but it gave me a return on that money, huge return, because what I want to know from them, I can immediately apply to my business and grow. So if you look at it that way, it's a fast way to get to your results. And I always look at that. I always look for mentors. And if they're not willing to work with me directly, I work with them through their books. I read a lot of books, through their courses. I'm constantly going through courses and trainings and that kind of stuff.
So powerful. It's that concept of a decade in a day, right? That Tony Robbins talks about too.
Yeah.
How you can download all of this knowledge. And I mean, you just said it, books, courses. You could take someone's life's study or work that he invested all these hours and years to master. You can download that through their course or their book.
I agree. And I've actually been to all Tony Robbins events. I've done every one of them. I've met Tony in person. He's a great guy. And I love what he teaches. And that's a perfect example. So I think self-education, re-educating yourself, investing into yourself and what you know is the fastest way to get the results and the success that you're looking for in your business.
Fantastic. Now, a core message in our show is to leave our families, communities, and the world better than we found it by passing down a mindset, values, and principles to future generations, not just money. So if you cannot pass on any money to future generations, but we're only allowed to pass on 3 principles to them to build wealth and achieve happiness and success, what would they be?
3 principles?
Yeah.
Wow. I would say, well, I just named one of them, which is find mentors and leverage their expertise. So that's a big one. I would say another concept, I actually got this from Tony Robbins as well, is CANI, which stands for constant and never-ending improvement. So the idea that you can do something quickly and then improve it later instead of trying to do it perfectly. So do something, take action, and then improve it constantly. Because it's never finished. That's a very important quality to have. I think it separates the winners from the losers, as the losers are always looking for things to be perfect before they take action. And then third, I would say generosity. Generosity is extremely important. So as you start making money, almost everybody that's probably watching this right now is watching it on a computer. We have some means. We're not destitute like a large portion of the world that doesn't even have internet access. We are at a certain level. I think you should start thinking about giving some of your money away. And as you start giving your money away, you'll find that you become wealthier and wealthier. It's an ancient principle and it works. And generosity, I find that generosity can literally lead to wealth. You can't be too generous.
Yeah, that's so powerful because you tap into the how the universe works, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. This has been fantastic, and I've been super excited about this, and this was really, really cool. Where can folks learn more about you? Where can they follow you on social media and so forth? And where can they stay informed of all of the projects that you're involved with? Sure.
If you just want to see general content, I do a lot of teaching for entrepreneurs, and I talk about books a lot. I talk about just things that I'm learning. You can follow me at bpagester, BPAGESTER on any of the social channels. And then if you want to learn about what I teach, I have a formula for Airbnb. It's called the B&B formula. And that's at BNB, like boy, Nancy, boy, formula.com. And you can learn about exactly what I teach and all that kind of stuff. And you can also find B&B formula on all the social channels.
Awesome. And then for listeners and our viewers, cashflowninja.com/BNB. You definitely do not want to watch that webinar that Brian is hosting. Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey and your knowledge and providing so much value for my listeners.
No, I thank you so much. I totally am behind what you teach. Cash flow equals freedom. People need more cash flow in their lives. Stop trading that time for money. And that's what I love that you're teaching that to people. So thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
Life settlement investments have allowed financial and banking institutions to not only buy their equity contractually, but also diversify their capital from any economic, market, and geopolitical risk. It's been part of the billion-dollar blueprint followed by institutional investors. And if you're an accredited investor, you can also now participate in this vehicle with enormous growth potential. You can watch an informational webinar presented by one of the premier organizations providing life settlement investments, Penumbra Solutions, at cashflowninja.com/life settlements. Thank you again for joining me on the Cashflow Ninja. If you like what you hear and appreciate what we're trying to build here, please subscribe, rate, and write a review for our show on iTunes and share our show with family, friends, and your network. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can sign up for our newsletter at cashflowninja.com. I want to thank you for spending your most precious resource with me today, your time. Until next time, my friend, live a life of passion and purpose on your terms. This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The information being presented and considered does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation, and it does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax and legal advisor or other qualified professionals, and you should not use the information in place of a customized consultation with a licensed professional regarding your specific personal financial objectives, situation, and needs. We believe the information provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, timeliness, or completeness.